China, one of the oldest civilizations and the land of John Cena's native tongue, along with many, many other languages. These languages vary widely, but they all share one common thread: the characters. Throughout history, many people have tried to standardize one of these as a lingua franca across the country, and others yet have tried to create new systems to replace those characters. The latter, however, has never succeeded because all attempts suffered from the same fundamental flaw. They created a system to write the way only one of the many languages was spoken, when they should have been speaking the way all of the languages write. Chinese characters, also known as Han characters, Hanzi, Kanji, or Diacao Da Dagata, are part of a logographic writing system used to write the Chinese languages, along with a number of other languages influenced by the country. The earliest known version of this writing system dates back to 1200-ish BCE and is mostly pictographic, meaning the graphics are like pictos, and their appearance is directly linked to their meaning, like emoji. However, as the writing system matured, characters moved away from these pictures and became more abstract, going from person to, sure, that can be water, and then right back to absolutely 100% clear what they mean. Along with characters getting more abstract, they also standardized. Because of this, characters often contain other characters, which are themselves made up of standardized components that convey some base meaning, except when it actually doesn't most of the time. These base components are called radicals, and what's considered a radical is mostly arbitrary. In 1716, under the direction of the Kangxi Emperor, the Kangxi Dictionary was published, which defined a set of 214 radicals. Like most Chinese dictionaries, the characters within it were ordered by their radical, and then further ordered by the number of strokes needed to write the character. While this was not the first time this particular set of radicals was defined, it cemented them as the standard set to use for centuries. It's still used in some places to this day, although there's a more modern set of 201 radicals used by the Chinese government and many modern Chinese dictionaries, or for anyone else who's a big fan of using 13 less of things. Along with these radicals standardizing, so too did characters' stroke order, which is the order in which the strokes are written. Generally speaking, Chinese modern stroke order is based around 10 different rules. Top, bottom, then left, right, horizontal before vertical, save the big stroke till last, diagonals go right to left before left to right, symmetric characters have their insides written before their outsides, inside after outside in a box, left vertical stroke is written first in a box, bottom of a box is written last, dots and little strokes go last, and ignore rule number 2 if that vertical is actually diagonal. With all of these rules, plus the occasional exception to keep it spicy, each character has a correct way to write it down. This, combined with a set of radicals, can then fully describe the way any Han character is broken down and how each of its segments is written. We can even type out exactly how it's broken down with the wonders of the Unicode Consortium, also known as our emoji overlords, which in 1999 introduced 11 ideographic description sequence characters to Unicode to represent how characters are composed from one another, including next to each other, top-bottom, and polyespo style. So, characters are made of more characters, which are made of radicals and written with officially ordered strokes and with internationally standard ways to represent their composition. What a simple, intuitive system that we can now use to create just as intuitive of a language. This language's full name in the simplified dialect, oh yeah, there's dialects too, is Diacao Dasa Dagata Belerle La Tai Het Kela. But for simplicity, I'll be referring to it by its pronunciation in Mandarin Chinese, Hanziyu. To speak Hanziyu, a speaker simply pronounces the components of a character and then the strokes that make them up. There's many ways of analyzing Han character strokes, but Hanziyu is based on a 6-stroke analysis, which is the smallest system that can realistically describe a character. This means that so-called combining strokes are not used, and instead are represented by their most similar base stroke. Complex strokes are pronounced as their component strokes, meaning that this is represented by the 2 strokes Na and Dian. Each stroke in Hanziyu can be realized as one of 3 consonants or 3 vowels, giving us 18 consonants and 18 vowels, including diphthongs. The consonants are ma, na, nga, pa, ta, ka, ba, da, cha, za, ja, fa, sa, sha, ha, and la. And the vowels are I, U, U, E, U, O, A, Ya, Ye, Yu, Wei, Wo, Wa, Ao, A, I, O. This inventory is loosely based on a combination of Mandarin, Hokkien, and Cantonese, plus a healthy dose of completely disregarding any and all phonotactics from those languages. This means that in Hanziyu, any consonant can be put next to any vowel, but CV syllable structure is required. In addition to these phonemes, there's 9 tones, based on the same languages, but with a couple of extra fun distinctions, including a high-low dipping distinction and a peaking tone, giving us these 9. Ah, 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 and ah. Now let's talk about the orthography. To make it readable, however, there is also a romanization based on pinyin. It also adds a new vowel character for U and and removes pinyin system of consonants changing the way vowels are produced. So this is pronounced ji rather than zhi. To pronounce a character, we need a list of its strokes in order. They're then split into pairs, and because we're doing linguistics, they're not just strokes, they're stroke eames. In each pair, the first stroke is realized as a consonant, and the second as a vowel, giving us that strict CV syllable structure we talked about before. For each of these pairs, let's call the first stroke the C stroke, and the second the V stroke. For the first stroke pair of any character, the C stroke is realized with its first consonant reading, and the V stroke by its first vowel reading, giving us k and e in this example. The tone of the vowel is based on the V stroke's position relative to the C stroke, with one tone assigned to each of the 9 possible directions. If 2 strokes in a pair touch one another, all 9 strokes can be used, but for disconnected strokes, only the 4 cardinal directions can be used. In this case, the E touches the bottom left of the character, giving us ki. For the rest of the pairs, the reading of the stroke is determined by the C stroke's position relative to the V stroke of the previous pair. This works just like choosing a tone, and also follows that touching, no touching rule. In this character, however, there is an exception. If the V stroke of a pair is a hook, then the next pair's mapping is based on the C stroke that hook was attached to, rather than the hook itself. So here, the consonant stroke of the second pair is left relative to k, meaning the pair will use C2 V1 reading, giving us pe, with the es tone in the center right position. Remember how I said there were 9 tones? That was an example of a classic linguistics technique called lying. There's also a 10th tone, pronounced like Mandarin's neutral tone, which is used when there's an odd number of strokes in a character. In this case, the last stroke is pronounced as a consonant with a neutral schwa appended. This means that the last stroke of some characters is ambiguous in its horizontal position, but that just makes it more cursed, so it's a feature, not a bug. We now technically have a complete system to pronounce a character, but simply speaking, those strokes is just way too slow. Remember Kangxi and his radicals? Let's take those simple common characters and shorten the pronunciations a bit. The process for shortening these mainly consists of combining 2 vowels and their tones together, then either removing the second consonant, replacing its vowel with a neutral schwa, or occasionally keeping the second vowel but giving it a neutral tone. Some duplications also cut out, and in shortened radicals, a h can be pronounced as a glide between the 2 vowels rather than an actual consonant. So instead of pronouncing this, we can just say, now that's efficiency. Shortened radicals are nice, but radicals are really meant to be standard components of other characters. Thanks to Unicode, we already have a way to decompose characters, so we can break down how a character is written and pronounce its pieces. To combine them, each of the 11 composition types is assigned a final like this, and surprise, I lied again! Our syllable structure is actually CVC when the syllable is at the end of the character's component because of these finals. There's also a new sound, which is just the geminated form of In some dialects, these 2 sounds are allophones, as well as all of the voicedness distinctions for the finals. With all that done, we can append these finals to each component and finally speak a full character. Oh, and as a quick side note, when in a character, a radical often doesn't look like the actual character. All of these are in fact different ways of writing the same radical, but in Hanziyu, a radical is always pronounced as the shortened form of the full character. Additionally, all radicals are based on their form in traditional Han characters, even in the simplified dialect. Well, now we can speak any character we want. All we need to do is get its full decomposition as a tree, stopping at any radicals we find and going as far as possible on the non-radical components. Then for each radical, use the shortened pronunciation of its full character, and for any non-radical, we pronounce its strokes by pairing them into C and V. We read across the leaf nodes of this tree, adding a final based on the component's composition type with its next component, and bing bam boom, you got yourself a full word in Hanziyu. Easy as 句式來源嘅這幅最厲害句式來源嘅必答大家. Hanziyu is based off standard written Chinese, but there's two key differences in vocabulary to any other Chinese languages: loanwords and compound words. Because of the one syllable per character rule in Chinese languages, there's a lot of homonyms. To avoid ambiguity, many nouns are actually made up of two words which overlap in meaning together, like 美丽 or 语言. That way, the listener can Venn diagram the words in their head to get a better idea of what the speaker is talking about. This is a really clever solution, but obviously in Hanziyu, this homonym problem doesn't exist, so the second word in these kinds of compounds is just omitted. Because Han characters are logography, the written form of loanwords in languages like Mandarin is a bit silly, giving us literal translations like Han Castle and 3 Bright Rule. Of course, no one thinks of these literal meanings, but we can do better in Hanziyu. Instead of finding characters with the pronunciation we're looking for, we can just create a completely new character based on the pronunciation. For instance, we can pronounce Agma Schwa as Agma Schwa and write it like this. What an elegant system, and what a perfect new logo for the Agma Schwa channel. Well, that's everything. Pronunciation, grammar changes, shortenings, graphic design consulting for Conlang and YouTube channels. I guess that means there's only one thing left to do. Điều thất thủ thế gia đế hải đô thật tự kê lò kê bị tập gia lợ thủ xa đô thật đà thô dịch gia lợ đô ra dê sở kê lợ bố thất giặc bố dù chai thiểu chao gia lửa hai sở ba thuế đại hiệu gia lợ tư gờ ba thuế phí bia bờ dẹp kê ga sở dê vào bếp đê lờ kê lợ đại hiệu đẹp dê sở tư sở kê lợ dê sở khá chiêu phở抓rờ dù chai thiểu chao đủ hai thiê sở thu ra đờ tiêu sở bi bố thất giặc bố. Ba thuế cho rờ chủ tu thái đầu xe hợp bố thất giá bố tuệ hơ đảo phư lẻ dê khá chiêu phật đê ngỡ bia phở khí phê giá lỡ khế thê hợp tuệ sở điều chất đủ thê gia điều chất đờ đê chai ngỡ đá cháo đủ hết dê sở bê rờ lệ khép đờ khá chiêu phật bìl dâu ji phê gờ bố thất giá bố xe chú chú tiêu châu的 bếp chú给cấp khế下chế sơ tập đá cơ đủ hết đủ su câu bờ đá lửa lẻ hư. Khi phép đủ thư khá chú phật đá ngập ba chú ba thuế bí bia bờ tập khế ca sở chế phó đẹp đê cơ chế sâu xa phật chế phó ba thiếu chế lỏa sơ chú hai ghê giờ đập chú sở khế lập đại hiệu đủ chai thiểu chao đủ hai thiê giờ đủ ra đỡ chú châu bi đáp khí khế lâm đá ngơ bờ giảm ba thuế cho rờ chú đủ thái đầu xe hợp chú chất đủ thế gia chú châu đỡ đẹp chế sở chế lắc đủ hợp bê sai đầu tháp bú bia bờ gia lợ bố lê hai khờ ghé cho rập đê chế lắc đủ hợp chú bi hai chú đá ngơ đê hai khế đỡ chú châu bi đẹp chế sở đủ sở khế lợ chế phép khá chú phật cho rờ bố thất giặc bố tập khế lợ đủ thư khí bí bia phật gửi lẻ thê. If you want to see the list of translated characters and radicals, along with all of my sources and a couple of scripts I wrote to help speed up the translation process, there's a link to my GitHub in the description. Thank you to Agma Schwa for hosting this incredibly cursed competition. Thanks for watching. See you around, and